Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good ladies and gentlemen of this body. I am a freshman here in this honorable House of Representatives, and I have the utmost respect for this body and its members. And I will share with you today my thoughts regarding House Bill 248. I'm of the opinion that with the option that we have before us, that the absolute worst case scenario regarding this decision I have before me is to let Idaho default to a federal exchange. This will cost the average exchange user in Idaho over double the estimated operating costs than a state exchange. We also cede every bit of control that we have over to an insolvent federal government that I firmly believe does not have the best interest of Idaho citizens in mind. Despite many misconceptions, or at least nothing that I've seen so far, we do not have the third option of simply rejecting either a state or a federal exchange along the way. There are many who think that if we reject a state exchange, then PPACA will simply disappear and collapse under its own weight. I have done my own research in this arena, independent of lobbyists, of business, of the governor's office, and what I see is a president that we have in office that has just won his second term, where this is his signature piece of legislation. He spends money like it's free, and despite what the states do, Obama and his administration are not going to let this program fail. That has become very clear to me from the many conversations I've had over the last few months. So that leaves us with doing damage control. I, as a state legislator, cannot repeal PPACA. I would be the first one to do it if I could. But I can vote to exercise damage control to the best of my ability. I feel that we have those damage control protections built in to House Bill 248. While it's not a perfect bill, I feel that it's strong enough to lend my support. The fact that we have no state liability if the exchange fails. There's been a lot of talk in this body today about the independent body corporate and politic method that was used to establish the exchange. I have learned through countless meetings, reading thousands of pages of laws and opinions, news articles over the last few months, that this is probably the best way to go to limit our state's liability, and something that we are very unsure about. We will run the exchange for much cheaper than the federal government, which will save some of our more needy citizens money that could otherwise be kept in our Idaho economy, and not take food off the table only for that money to be sent to the federal government. The exchange is a voluntary marketplace for health insurance that any insurer that meets the lawful requirements may participate in, either in-state or out-of-state. The exchange also offers protections for Idaho citizens in this bill, such as keeping our citizens' personal information secure. I was at the negotiation table when we put that provision in, and I made it specifically clear I would like to see that in this bill, and I'm very happy we got that accomplished. We have placed provisions in this law that prohibit the rush of the implementation of an exchange in Section 416109, subsection 2, that reads, should the Federal Department of Health and Human Services and or the United States Congress change both the establishment date and the eligibility limitation date for the exchange, the governor shall, upon his determination that such events have occurred, issue a proclamation declaring that Idaho will not be obligated to comply until the new dates are set by HHS or the United States Congress. The governor shall file such proclamation with the Secretary of State. This effectively makes sure that we are not rushing into this ahead of time if the dates are changed. We have placed a provision in this legislation, Section 41-605, subsection 2, Section I, that we've heard referenced many times in this body today. The intent of that piece being put into this bill was specifically for the Oklahoma case and many other pending lawsuits that may come against this legislation. I hope that Oklahoma is successful. More power to them. But in case that they are not, and in case they are, that we would be able to remove this from our state exchange immediately effective with this section. And I've heard a lot of talk in this body today about legislative oversight. That was my problem, my personal problem with the gentleman on the second floor's original version of the bill. So I've worked diligently, as I know that several others have, in trying to establish more legislative oversight. Now with 3 voting members on the board, a report to each legislator and the exchange's germane committees each year. Finally, and this hasn't been talked about this much today, finally, if at any time the legislature reviews the reports and feels like the exchange is no longer in Idaho's best interest, the Idaho legislature has the full power and authority to repeal this act at any point in time. I have heard from some that once this is passed, it will be impossible to repeal. I would argue that we as a legislative body should certainly watch this and act responsibly with the passage of this legislation, that we must continue to monitor its interactions with our citizens. The other point is that this exchange is strictly voluntary. In Section 41-1602, the law specifically states that participation in the exchange is voluntary and that no person or employer shall be required for this chapter to purchase a health benefit plan through the exchange. This is not being forced on anyone, and no one is required to use it. There have been concerns raised with this bill that this bill does not protect life or religious freedom. I will tell you that I am a very pro-life person and have been for many, many years. I would submit to you that defaulting to a federal exchange would be the absolute worst option for somebody who's pro-life, considering the very anti-life makeup of this president and his administration and the Department of the Health and Human Services. Idaho tends to be a pro-life state overall, and I am quite confident that we will continue to protect life with a state exchange much better than the liberal federal alternative. Section 41-6108 that reads, pursuant to sections 41-6104 and 41-6105 Idaho Code, the board shall, to the fullest extent practicable, enter into contracts with businesses conducting business in Idaho and employing citizens of this state to staff and provide support for the exchange. What this does is this keeps money in the state of Idaho, supporting Idaho's economy by creating jobs instead of sending that money to the federal government. I felt this important to be included if we were going to do a state exchange. You know, I feel that many times throughout history, we have seen the fallout of public bodies backing away from the negotiating table. If we default to a federal exchange, that is exactly what we do. This is a difficult time in our lives. We are seeing medical costs skyrocket and insurance premiums rise significantly every single year. I don't think anybody in this body disputes that. Reform is imminent, or it will be detrimental to our citizens. There's no doubt about that. Idaho has some of the lowest costs of insurance nationwide. I, however, say that they are still much too high for our citizens and that have some of the lowest wages in the nation. Healthcare indeed needs to be reformed, and I don't believe that PPACA is the answer, nor do I believe that the answer lies in House Bill 248. I have wrestled with this issue for many sleepless nights. Again, I have studied thousands of pages of law, opinions, news articles, and attended countless meetings trying to find an answer to this. I have come to the conclusion that as a member of this distinguished body of the Idaho House of Representatives, I cannot and will not subject the citizens of Idaho to an insolvent federal government that cannot keep its own house in order, let alone Idaho's. I believe that the federal government does not serve the best interests of the people of Idaho. I prefer to stand in front of my people in these turbulent times rather than willingly cede all power and control just to hand them over to the federal government, especially if Idaho has the option of being proactive and doing the job right. My job as an Idaho State Representative is to govern. I can only govern with the facts that I have in front of me. I refuse to govern on unproven opinions. Those facts are that we still have an exchange either way. I prefer to have Idaho citizens that make up the board, Idaho citizens that are the navigators for the insurance plans, and it is imperative to keep the funds associated with the exchange in Idaho's economy and utilize Idaho citizens that we can engage if we have concerns instead of despairingly trying to contact faceless bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., all while fighting to repeal PPACA in its entirety. The fight that we face regarding PPACA is not the exchange portion of the law. It's the entire law itself. That needs to be done at the presidential ballot box in 2016 and at the federal level. I believe that Obama and his administration are trying to accomplish eventually is a single-payer system such as Medicaid. If we default to a federal exchange, I am of the opinion that this puts this administration one step closer to accomplishing that. This is a path that I am quite sure that we as a state do not want to explore. I think that we all have the common goal in mind here in protecting the state of Idaho, but just different paths of getting there. There have been many arguments in opposition to this bill today. We don't have a fee cap. We are very aware of the new rules that come from HHS. We don't have legislative control. There are over half the states that have rejected a state exchange. In my mind, Idaho is a true leader among the great United States. Great leaders, to me, stay in the fight. They stay at the negotiation table. I am convinced that Idaho can run circles around anything that the federal government wants to do. Maybe it's my lack of institutional knowledge, but I haven't had anyone explain to me how we can reject Obamacare in its, Patient and Protection Affordable Care Act in its entirety. But if somebody were to show me, I would be the first one to sign a letter to get that done. The first one. I have all the same concerns that those of you who oppose House Bill 248 have, but I feel comfortable that we have taken the necessary precautions with this bill to move forward, to at least give it a try to see if this is the right path for the state of Idaho. For these reasons, I have decided to support House Bill 248 to protect Idaho citizens from harmful federal policy. Thank you.